Welcome to this week's video. In this week's video, we will look at my past week's training again. Then I will take you along for this week's session as I always do. And then I've discussed the easy runs, I've discussed the long runs, and then we have interval days. So hope you enjoyed. Let's get into it. Here we have my training log. As you can see, we are busy with the 5th week of training. Let's look at the Strava of last week. Monday, easy run, 65 minutes. That was a good one. Wednesday, easy run of 35 minutes, also solid. And then Friday and Sunday were the final easy runs. Here I went 7Ks, and here I just ran with my little boy in a stroller till he fell asleep. Then we had the Tuesday session that was in last week's video. If we look at that session, you will remember that from last week's video, after the 3rd rep, the camera's battery died. So here I have the Strava. So as we can see, the goal was to do 5 times 2Ks, which we managed, and it was to increase the pace a little bit or slightly from each 2K rep. So the first ones I did at 4:12 and 4:15. Then the next 2Ks 4:11, 4:12, 4:07, 4:09, 4:06, 4:05, and then the last ones were 4:01 and 4:03. So I progressively got faster throughout all of those runs. Then on Thursday I do my hilly medium long runs. If we look at the long run, it wasn't the most elevation last week. I just was a bit stressed because of the previous week. If you remember, my Achilles was giving me some issues, so last week I was a bit nervous, but it actually was fine. My Achilles didn't give me any issues, so did a 20K medium long run with some hill strides at the end. So I ran 19Ks and then 1K of up and down a hill. Yeah, 5 degrees gradient by the looks of things, so it's not an insanely steep hill. And then the long run last week was a 26K long run, and I had planned to run 3K warm up, then 17Ks at a steady between 430 and 440, and then a 3K pickup to marathon pace. If we look at the title of this run, What a Mental Battle. And the reason for that, if we look at this run, heart rate wasn't too crazy. It spiked a little bit towards the end. The legs actually felt okay, but the reason it was mentally tough is because from this very first pickup K, so from kilometer number 4, it just felt like a lot of hard work to pick up the pace. I feel like I've lost some snappiness, some quick turnover in my legs. So what I've decided to do is to change up how I'm going to do my Tuesday interval sessions a little bit. I'll discuss that more in details in the section of intervals. Usually these 430s and 440s aren't mentally tough for me. It's quite easy to get into that stride, but on this day it felt like constant work, and I don't want that. If in a marathon, for the first 30Ks, if you have to constantly think about how hard you're running, that is not going to bode well for the last 10Ks. So I need to get this to feel more easy. So that was my week, giving me a total of 97Ks, right? And if we look at our training for this week, looks to be just over 100Ks. I'm self-coached, so when I feel like I need to shorten my runs, I do so. If I feel like I can lengthen my runs, I do so. So this is just a guide. It's not a set in stone thing. Before we get into the topic of intervals, let's watch this week's interval session. Let's go.
Hello, it's Tuesday. Welcome to another session. Yep, let's get into it. Busy with my standard 3K warm-up. Yeah, looking positive. Lovely weather. It's not hot, but Sun's out, so that's nice. Today's session will be 1k fast, 600 float, 400 fast, and then about 60 seconds rest. Let's get it. I'd initially planned a different session, and maybe I'll get into more details back at home, but pretty much comes down to that on Saturday's long run my legs weren't feeling snappy at all, so I'm making these sessions quicker, shorter, snappier. Quicker, shorter, snappier. Sounds good, eh? I'm taking one gel. We'll see when we take it. Maybe after rep 1 or 2. And yeah, then we'll have a cool down, giving us total volume of 18 Ks today. Legs feel fine. Got a bit of DOMs, but otherwise I'm sharp. 3K warm up donezo. I'm gonna take my gel. Gone with a fresh orange again because that was actually nice last week. Might be a keeper, this one. 40 grams of carbs. And then I'll do some dynamics, some drills, and then we go. Yeah, that's a keeper. That's a keeper. Okay, just to explain the session again. 6 times, 1k on, 600 float, 400 meters on, fast on. And then about 60 seconds standing, walking, recovery. So that times 6. The float is not a slow jog. Talk about the paces. The 1Ks I'll do around 4 minutes, okay? And then the 400s, 350, maybe even below 350. Since it's speed, we gotta put the cap in speed mode. There we go. Okay. Let's go. First rep done. Now 60 seconds of walking / standing rest. There we go. Yeah. At 400 I was running at around 340, so that takes it out of me a bit here at altitude. Second rep done. Feeling right. Hip flexor bothering a bit, but only doing the 1k for some weird reason. Okay, 20 seconds. That 400 sucked. And that was only the third one. So one or two things gotta give. Either my float need to slow down, or the 1k. The 400 needs to stay hard. Anyways, 20 seconds. Let's go. Screw that. 4th rep done. 2 more. Soldier through. Soldier through. Soldier through. And then on a 400. And then. Full in the head. Yeah. I'll manage. One more, then cool down, and then we're chilling. Oh, I just had to sidestep a lady on this last rep, and my knee went a bit ow. She didn't really look where she was walking, so anyways, happens, feels alright. Cool down, 2.5-ish Ks, up to 18. Let's go. When you do your warm-up and cool down, try to run on the other side of the road. If you're doing it on a track or something, run the other direction. Yeah, just take a bit of strain of constantly having one camber to one side or constantly turning to the one side on the track. Yeah, just helps avoid Achilles injuries a little bit.
Alright, so we've discussed easy runs, we've discussed long runs, now all we need to discuss is intervals. Unlike last week's discussion and the easy run discussion, I'm not going to be pulling up any graphs or anything this week. I'm simply going to dive into what I've done for my training plan. Before I discuss this, again, this is for me personally. I am self-coached, I'm experimenting with this personally for my own benefits and my own growth. That means I also change things up as I feel I need to. And this week is a prime example of that. This week I did a session here, so this was yesterday, it was Tuesday, where I had initially planned to do a reverse ladder or ladder session, depends which way you look at it, where I was going to start with a 4K on, then a 1K recovery, 3K on, 1K recovery, 2K on, 1K recovery, and then a final last kilometer. But as I mentioned, something's missing in my leg turnover. The snappiness doesn't feel like it's quite there anymore. So what I'm going to be doing going forward is just changing up the way I set up my interval sessions on the Tuesday. The main goal for me personally is to use my Tuesday sessions to support my long run sessions. If my long run feels hard in a specific way, I will adjust my Tuesday session to support that. That leads me to what can we actually control in an interval session. There are a few variables that you can change. The main ones I would say is obviously total volume for the session. Then the next one would be the volume of the intervals themselves. Then the next one would be the intensity, so the speed you're running at. And then the last one, which is the one that I feel like often gets overlooked, is the recovery, the rest. I tend to keep my interval sessions total volume quite similar throughout the block. You'll notice that the total volume of the intervals themselves, so the hard kilometers, is usually between 8 and 10 kilometers. It can be slightly more, can be slightly less, but that's generally what I'm working with. What I change a lot, going from cycle to cycle, there I'm playing around with the volume of each interval itself. The intensity will change week to week slightly, and then the recovery is something that I'm playing around with more so. If we look at my training, these may change, like this last week has changed. I'm going to use yesterday's interval session as an example. What I did is I ran 1 kilometer fast, then I had a 600 meter float, and then I had a 400 meter fast. Then I would rest for 60 seconds, and then I would do that again. I did that 6 times. You wouldn't really consider 400 meter reps as part of marathon training, because surely marathon training, you want your reps to be longer. That's where playing with the other variables comes into play. I could use this same workout for a 5K block, but what I would change, maybe decrease the total volume by 1 rep. So instead of times 6, I would go times 5. I would up the intensity, but what differs very much between a 5K block and a marathon block is the recovery between the ons. Yesterday, what I ended up doing is I ran the 1Ks, I ran at 3 minutes 55 a K. Then the 600 float, I ran at 4 minutes 40 k, and then the 400s on 3 minutes 35 to 3 minutes 40. And then the recovery in between was 60 seconds of standing / walking. Now, if I had to look at this workout and I would adjust it for 5K plan, I would firstly make the 1K and the 400 faster. I would make the float slower, and then the 60-second recovery I could maybe extend to 90 seconds, maybe even longer. So that's how I can play with the variables to make it more specific to the training. That can maybe give you an idea of how you can play around with your sessions to make them more specific to whatever event you're training for. The shorter the event, the faster the ons have to be, but the more recovery you give yourself. If we go to the most extreme, if you look at 100-meter specialists, they're doing very little total volume in their sessions. They are recovering for minutes between each rep because they want to be running at full intensity when they do their ons. You could technically, it's not ideal, but you could technically take the exact same sessions that you do for marathon block and a 5K block and just play around with those variables a little bit, which will make it specific to what you're trying to achieve. Then obviously throughout the block, I need my sessions to become more specific. Last week I spoke a lot about specificity with the long runs. Well, the same goes for the interval sessions. How it progresses, longer recoveries in this first cycle, okay? Then maybe the reps are considered shorter, but because there isn't recovery between reps, it's a longer style session. And then in the final cycle, it becomes even more specific by making it longer tempo style runs combined with the shorter snappier stuff just to maintain that leg turnover. That's how I'm periodizing these sessions. Again, might change a little bit, but this is the current skeleton of what I'm planning to do for my interval sessions. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching. Give me some suggestions of things or topics to discuss. I've covered easy runs, I've covered long runs, and I've covered some intervals. Even if I'm not an expert, I can at least give an opinion. And then finally, last year at Cape Town, I ran in this shoe. This is the Adidas Adios Adizero Pro 3. Okay, did really well. I got my goal. So my goal last year was to run a sub 3 hours 30, and I ran 3:25 in these bad boys. I've been using them for my Tuesday sessions now. They are currently close to 500 kilometers in them, but they still work perfectly fine. However, I'm not running this year's Cape Town Marathon in these shoes. So out with the old, in with the new. Oh, look at that. Look at that beauty. Woo! All right, so these are the Adidas Adios Adizero Pro 4s. Okay, so very similar shoe. Okay, the foam is slightly different. This isn't going to become a shoe channel, so I'm not going to speak specs and all of that stuff. But as you can see, very similar build. Okay, now the biggest gripe for me with this shoe last year was that this upper was the most uncomfortable thing I've ever put on my foot. So I'm hoping, I have not run in these, they arrived today. I'm hoping that this upper does it for me. Oh no. Just by feels of things, it already feels 10 times better. But yeah, I will be testing these. I don't know, I'll probably take them out for 2 long runs before the marathon. One 25, 26k-ish long run, and then most likely the very final super massive long run as like a final dress rehearsal. So I'll use it for 2 long runs, and that's that. Then I shelf them. Okay, so I'm excited. Please be nice, upper. Please don't hurt me. So that was that. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in next week's video.